Greetings and salutations. This is Vaughn with Spirit of Health. Today we are going to talk about nuts. We're going to talk about soaking, fermenting nuts and seeds. We are using almonds today. Now I want to make the point first that what we're going to talk about today you can do with any nut or seed. You can do this with pecans, you can do this with Brazil nuts, with walnuts, with sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, any nut or seed. You really want to soak it and or ferment it before consuming. Why do you want to do that? Well, let's talk about that. Nuts contain something called phytic acid or phytates. It makes it very hard for the nut to be digested. It's a protective mechanism in nature to keep them from sprouting too quickly until the environment is perfectly right for that nut or seed to sprout. So if we eat nuts that are not properly soaked or properly fermented, they are very, very hard on the digestive system. And you're not going to be able to get all the nutrients you need out of the nut or seed, and or they can cause major digestive issues. And if anybody's had any lower bowel disorders like IBS, Crohn's, colitis, you know how hard nuts can be on your system. So you really want to soak them and or ferment them, preparing them properly so that you can get the most benefit out of them. Now, even with that being said, nuts and seeds in general are hard for the human body to digest. So if you have issues with liver gallbladder, if you have constipation issues, if you have lower bowel disorders, there's a lot of reason you want to be careful with eating nuts and seeds and not overdoing it. So let's get to it. So what we have here is we have a mason jar filled with almonds. Now when you are soaking or fermenting almonds, the first thing you want to do is you want to get a mason jar, and we usually put about 2 cups of almonds in here, and you're going to fill it with water. So it's really important to put the nuts in there, and you want to fill it with water, and you want to have at least 2 inches of water above the nuts. So in other words, you got where your nuts end, and you have at least 2 inches above that. Now the reason is because the nuts will expand as they soak. And if you fill the nut jar all the way full and add the water, your jar is going to explode. I've seen jars break, or the lid is going to pop and break. So you want to be careful of that. So first thing you do is you fill it with water. You put the nuts in, you fill it with water in the mason jar, and that's going to yield about 2 cups of almonds is going to yield about 1.5 cups of almond butter, for example. So once you have the water in there and the nuts in there, you want to add your ferment, a way to help break down those phytates and make it really digestible. And there's a number of different ways you can do that. Now you can see this one's kind of cloudy, and this is because we put whey in that. So we're going to talk about what you can put in it and the amounts. One thing you can put in it is sea salt. So you'd add a tablespoon of sea salt to this and put a lid on it, let it sit overnight. And you do want to soak nuts at least overnight, ideally maybe up to 24 hours, but at least 7-8 hours overnight at the minimum. So you can put a tablespoon of sea salt in here, close it up, let it sit. The other thing you can put in it is a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Same thing, close the lid, let it sit. Or whey, and that's what we used in this case. We used whey, and you actually want to use 1/2 cup of whey, and you're actually fermenting the nuts when you use the whey or the apple cider vinegar, which is a bonus. It just makes them that much more beneficial and easy to process and to digest. So the nuts are also hydrated with the water, which is another reason it makes them much easier to digest. So now what we're going to do, these have sat overnight in the whey, and they are soaked, hydrated, fermented, easily digestible now. I'm going to pour this off into a, whatever you want to call it, a strainer, a colander. And so I am going to pour that through here. And then what I want to do is I want to rinse them. So I have some purified water here. And I'm just going to rinse these real good. Okay, now these almonds are ready to go. So now that the almonds are ready, there's a couple of things you can do with them. It's important to prepare them and store them properly after they've been soaked. You can actually just put these in the refrigerator and just start to munch on them. They taste fantastic. Of course, we all love almonds, and so you want to refrigerate them and eat them. You also can dry them. You can dry them in a dehydrator. You can dry them in your oven at the lowest temperature. And if you dry them really well, it's really easy to make a nut flour out of them if they're really dried. If you use them when they're wet, which you can do, it makes more of a meal, more of a pasty, sticky type of a meal consistency. So those are just a couple of different options. But what we're going to do with these is we're just going to use them wet like this. They're fine and ready to go just like this. But if you don't consume them like in your refrigerator within a week, or if you don't dry them and make them into a flour or a nut butter, they will mold. So you want to use them up fairly quickly, or at least dry them. Okay, so I could do two different options here. I have a food processor and I have a Vitamix. And you can make your almond meal, your nut flour, your nut butter in either of these two options. Again, it has to be pretty dried to make it into a flour, or you can use them wet like this to make it into a meal, which is where you just blend it a little bit, or you got to keep going with it for sometimes 10-15 minutes to make it into a good nut butter, and that can take some time. So there it is. So I'm going to put a couple of cups, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in the Vitamix here. So that's 2 cups. And again, that'll make probably a cup and a half of nut butter that you can use for all different types of recipes or just as a dip. And if I just blend this just a little bit, I already have a almond meal, just blending it quickly. So I'm not going to go through the whole process of making it into a nut butter because that takes some time. But here I pretty much already got an almond meal going, and I just keep going with it to make a nut butter. So give me a few minutes to finish the preparation of this nut butter, and we'll see you in a few. Hey, we're back, and we have almond butter. You're probably wondering why I had this olive oil sitting here. So I just wanted to mention that as I was blending this in the Vitamix, I made a decision just to add a little bit of olive oil just to make it a little bit better consistency so that I could blend it up a little bit better. You could also add just a little bit of sea salt. But you can see this nice, thick, creamy almond butter that we use to make all different kinds of pancakes and muffins, or like I said, you can just use this as a dip. So thanks for watching this video on how to soak and ferment almonds and all variety of nuts and seeds. From our kitchen to yours, we thank you for watching. Bless you. Until we meet again.